Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Jerri Lynn Hogg. I'm faculty here at Fielding in the Media Psychology program. And today I'm going to talk about the human side of immersive technology. So I thought first what I would do was just talk a little bit about what is immersive technology, and then let you know how I got involved with researching in that area and a little bit about the psychology behind it, and then give you a variety of different examples of some of the current and innovative ways that immersive technology is being used, and then also give you some examples of how our current and recent students have used immersive technology in their research and applying to their particular field. Many of you might be familiar with the VR headset or the virtual reality headset. That's a totally immersive experience where you're not seeing the world around you, but rather just the immersive environment, the environment that has been created, digitally created. Now, to give you just a little bit of the understanding of where we are with virtual reality usage right now. This is a poll that was done by Artillery, which is an artificial intelligence organization, and talking about it with virtual reality. And this shows 2018, 2019, the population of folks that are 18 years old and older in the US, if they used it daily, weekly, monthly, a few times a year, or rarely to never. And this shows US VR users 2017 and estimated up to 2022, and shows how they expect it to continue to increase. I will say that immersive technology, particularly virtual reality, has been used primarily in the gaming industry, and there's been a lot of push to use it in other areas and have it to be more broadly used by consumers. You will see it in industries used quite a bit for training, very successfully. Still, price points and accessibility and having it mainstream in the common household is still not generalizable, and that we're seeing augmented reality, or the overlay of information, being used more regularly in homes. One more about virtual reality adoption, and again, looking at adoption rates of virtual reality compared to introduction of the cell phone, internet, even color TV. And as I mentioned before, the adoption rate of augmented reality, particularly on a mobile phone, has a lot more traction than virtual reality. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what augmented reality might look like, here is an example of the idea of being able to give sort of a 3D image overlay of information where you can still see the surroundings and the environment that you're in. Another idea, we don't see this quite as frequently, but overlay of information so that you can see the environment that you're in. And this is an interactive one where engaging in touching some of this information, you can launch other operations. Another idea of some of this is a little bit more along the lines of prototypes, but the potential that augmented reality has. Now, this is something they're actually using these in BMWs and a few other vehicles, but that overlay of information so that you can still keep your eyes on the road. My personal favorite along these lines is the idea of GPS. So instead of having to look over to a device that you have, either a GPS, or a lot of us are using our GPS on our phones now, and distracting, moving back and forth, this is the overlay of information. You're looking straight through the windshield. You can glance around and see how fast you're going. If in this particular case, if you look to the red arrow on the left-hand side, you'll see a cyclist, so alerting you that there is a warning, there's a cyclist, things to be concerned about. But also what it does, oftentimes will have a direction to, oh, this is where you turn. So instead of having to look away to see how many meters and am I turning right or left, or am I merging, etc., the information can be right in front of you while you're still looking through the windshield. As psychologists, one of the things that we are interested in is how much information on the screen is useful and how much is cognitive overload, so that I'm so distracted by the information that even though it's right in front of me, I'm paying attention to the information instead of the road in front of me. So ideally, with immersive technologies, you really want to know what is the goal for the immersive technologies that you're creating. So some of the things that you might want to think about is comparing that immersive environment and a virtual reality environment and what your reality is. Again, with that virtual reality experience can bring about sort of a state change. And I'll show you in a little bit how that might be a powerful component, is by being able to do that. There's meditation research that's going on that shows how virtual reality can really help with the contemplative state, and in different times when that might be very useful. Virtual reality as a mechanism to increase self-awareness, and also the idea that it has a whole variety of health, holistic, physical sensations and emotions and cognitive abilities that can be generated in a virtual reality state. But I think one of the big things that we worry about with that is a sense of presence and being there, and how that can be helpful and useful, and why we might want it, and at what cases might it be distracting. And what kind of benefits do we get with that increased sense of presence? For example, there are multiple studies that have shown that it is really a great assistance for knowledge transfer, and that idea of increasing learning behaviors, particularly right now it's being used in industries. So something where someone might train someone on a particular device, machine, etc. They can put, and takes time and might often be many mistakes at the beginning of the training, can have that very quickly, 20 minutes in virtual reality headset, and the person is practicing the behaviors while it's going on, and they have a much quicker learning curve. There's also greater compliance with treatment, and there's a lot of research to show that it lowers the need for technical precision, because you're right there in that high resolution. So let me just tell you how I got interested in immersive technologies. I actually, the story I'm going to share with you happened, I was already dabbling with immersive technologies, but this is where I really wanted to be able to understand, what is this psychological component and why does that work so well? I don't know how many of you remember Second Life. It was, it hit its stride, I think, in the early to mid 2000s. And I was actually teaching courses in Second Life. So the idea is that you had an avatar, and groups of people could get together and be in different lands with the avatar. We would often go to a library site or a classroom or something along those lines, and we'd all teleport there with our avatars. And otherwise, it was very much like what we have available to us right now with Zoom, where you could hear each other, and instead of actually seeing my face, you would see my avatar. And most people, not all, but most people did a close approximation of their physical body type. Some people decided to be parrots and birds and different animals, etc., but most people did a close approximation of what their body type was. So it was a really interesting way of getting together and holding discussions. But what happened, where my interest was particularly piqued, was what happened right after the course. So the class was over, people left, and I was there with two other colleagues. One of them lived in Southern California. I was in Connecticut in the middle of January snowstorm blizzard, cold snow flying sideways. My friend, obviously in Southern California, was in a much more temperate climate. And then we had a third colleague who was elsewhere in the United States. So we decided to teleport to a beach. And we're sitting on the beach, and the wind is blowing. There's this gentle breeze. The palm trees are going. The waves are crashing on the shore. And there was this immediate sense of relaxation. I felt like I was there on the beach. And there I was sitting next to my two colleagues. And notice I say sitting next, not my avatar happened to be placed next to my colleagues, but I felt the sensation of sitting there. And it was like how, when cognitively I know I'm sitting in Connecticut in a snowstorm and my other colleague is in California, why do I feel that I'm there? And so, really, to be able to explore that sense of presence and the potential of that sense of presence. So, I think this is the question, the number one question I get asked on a regular basis is, what's wrong with our actual reality? You know, what's bad about our actual reality? Why do we need a virtual one? In this particular case, and I don't know if it's going to work for me today. It's not. Okay. In this particular case, it's this woman sitting next to a man who's in a virtual headset, and he's batting his arms away, and she's got this look like, you know, what's going on here? Here we are sitting side by side, sharing each other's presence, but very much not sharing each other's presence. And of course, many of you probably remember just a few years ago when Zuckerberg said that he was going to take Facebook and have everybody into virtual reality, and that idea that zombie apocalypse. So, or, you know, what's our future of social? So let me take you into a place which is a little interesting. I was there was a company out of Santa Barbara, California, that was doing virtual reality research and was taking it to corporations and how they possibly could choose VR. So I wanted to show a colleague, and we were in Las Vegas at a convention, and I wanted to show a colleague how this worked who had never experienced virtual reality before. So, as often is the case, there were a lot of vendors all crammed into a hotel room, all taking up their, you know, small space. And so we were sort of lodged over in the corner. And this guy opens his suitcase and brings out this VR technology. And I have my headset on, and I'm up against a wall in my headset. And my colleague is also sort of lodged in there. And this third guy is there. We put our headsets on, and we're connecting with somebody in New York, somebody in Santa Barbara. And as you can see by this drawing, how rudimentary it was. And we were I think we were doing something mechanical to an airplane they were having us do. But it was amazing how even with graphics as rudimentary as this, that we were teleported to that. And within a few minutes, I was very much disconnected from the fact that I was jammed into a hotel room with multiple other vendors in there. And I was in a situation with somebody who was in New York and somebody who was in Santa Barbara, and three of us who were in Las Vegas, and no longer thinking of the geography of my environment around me, but rather what the operation was that we were doing together, and was very much in the moment. So this shows you some of the different ways that augmented reality is being used in the healthcare industry. And I'm sure some of you are already familiar with some of the technology that's out there, particularly in wearables, with being able to capture a heart rate or other biometrics. We now have virtual reality that's so sophisticated that you can get inside the human body and look at representations of the human body and look at various aspects. So I have been in virtual reality human bodies before, and in that particular day that I'm thinking of, I happened to have a strain in my neck shoulder area, and having had some background in kinesiology and muscular structures, I wanted to see exactly where those attachments were and how the muscles were connected to the bones, to try to figure out what exactly was bothering me and how I might be able to make that pain go away. And it was very interesting for me to be in the body and be able to look at the different muscle and bone connections. Obviously, this has relevant use for doctors in training, etc. So there's amazing how we can now generate and then be immersed into things like the human body. This is a picture of an expert surgeon that was showing a surgeon in a remote location how to do surgery. In this particular case, I think they were doing surgery on a cleft lip, and it was in a very rural area where you couldn't get experts. Not only was the physician, the expert surgeon, able to help in this particular surgery, but by doing it several times, he in essence was training the actual surgeon who was doing the work. So you now have an expert in that area. So not only was it great at training, but it was able to get surgery to people who needed it that might not normally be able to because of where they were geographically. Again, by being able to have information right in front of you, the surgeons, through augmented reality or augmented reality overlays onto bodies, are able to have a better, more accurate, more precise bits of information to help them. One of the surprising things that virtual reality has been able to do is create anxiety and pain relief. In this particular story, and these videos are available on YouTube should you want to see more have more interest in them. This is out of Stanford Medical School, where they have done many of much of the research in this area. This particular young boy went through a severe accident, and he had burns that needed to be debrided every day. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is something that often happens with burns, and it is one of the most painful things to go through. And so this young boy had incredible anxiety because he knew it was coming, and then incredible pain when the procedure was being done. So they decided they would try to use virtual reality to hopefully decrease some of his anxiety. The amazing result was they almost completely eliminated his anxiety, and they also were able to decrease significantly his pain. So the idea that something like this can be done is just amazing. I have a short video here. This is a way to look at the possible issues that somebody might have. The possible issues that somebody might experience being on the autistic spectrum. So in this particular case, it shows someone watching. A mother is trying to get some money from the ATM, and they're in a mall. So there's a lot of noise, a lot of sensory information. And while we might, if we didn't have this headset on, watching what it was like for the child to experience, we might wonder, well, why would he have a hard time while his mom walked over to go to the ATM? So let me play this briefly. Skip Rizzo is out of USC in creative labs, and he's been doing a lot of work with virtual reality and the military. I am going to try to show you a video. So excuse me while I stop sharing and just show you a little bit about some of the work that he has done.
Headset as you navigate down an alley in Afghanistan. That's what it looked like a couple of years ago. You can see the difference in the graphics, but we actually use the same application to test attention, memory, multitasking ability in a simulated environment. We've also done non-military apps. This is a visual spatial application for testing mental rotation abilities. And this is a virtual classroom we developed for assessing attention skills in kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So you can see the child has to pay attention to the board, but meanwhile there's distractions, and we can test how well they can stay focused while the teacher goes out the door and kid just threw a paper airplane, and all the challenges of a real classroom. We've also built things with the Microsoft Connect for physical rehabilitation. So the idea being, without any wires or heavy instrumentation, the camera is tracking her movement and putting it in a game-like context so that physical therapy might be not so boring and repetitive. It might be fun like a game. Finally, I'm going to show a very brief clip of a virtual human, artificially intelligent virtual human, serving the role as a patient, and a social worker is interacting with this patient. And essentially what you're going to see is a project that aims to give novice clinicians the opportunity to practice and perhaps screw up a bunch with a digital patient before they get their hands on a live one.
Good afternoon, Sergeant Castilla. What brings you in today?
Well, my wife told me she thought I should talk to someone. She's been pretty concerned about me since a soldier suicide on base last week.
You happen to know the soldier?
Yes, he wasn't a friend. I met the Marine once or twice. He seemed normal at the time. I guess I'm afraid I might end up like him.
So you get the idea here. I know the sound is in.
What Skip was showing right there. Let me get back into PowerPoint. What Skip was showing there, the one that interests me the most is the virtual therapist. And what he's done in the past is use the virtual therapist in the opposite direction. Many times in the military, there's a lot of stigma that goes along with seeing a therapist, and yet our military folk are put in harm's way so much that it's understandable that there might be an impact on mental well-being. And so it's critical that they have access to therapists that might be able to help them recover and strengthen their mental well-being. But because of the stigma, oftentimes they won't go to a therapist. So there has been a lot of research and a lot of work particularly through Skip Rizzo and his team at USC, as far as getting military folks to engage in some type of therapy through a virtual therapist. So now what I'd like to do is talk about some of the work that some of our students have done with immersive technologies. This first one is Clouds Over Syria. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. It was a virtual reality movie that was done by the United Nations, and the goal was for the United Nations to make people more aware of the kinds of things that were happening in Syrian refugee camps. And so not only awareness, but hopefully people would be either volunteer or give money towards helping out the Syrian refugee camps. In this particular case, they followed a young girl named Syria, and they went throughout the day of all the different activities, from being at home and having a meal to playing a ball game with some of the other kids. And because you're in this immersive experience, you really get a sense and feel of what her day was like. And so the student was doing research about the emotional impact of 360-degree environments. Another student right now is currently doing her dissertation research on augmented reality and child car seats and the proper way to be able to install those, and how using augmented reality have a greater success in doing so. This particular one of our students was doing a poster, and her poster happened to be about Facebook use and food consumption behaviors and risk perception. What she was able to do with augmented reality was, when you hovered your phone over different aspects, it would show you where the populations were that had those results or additional information. So it made that poster come to life. Another student did her research on Hamilton, and what she did was, does it make a difference in how someone experiences Hamilton if you can use augmented and virtual reality? Another student is a dietitian by training and getting her PhD in media psychology. And she was using cookbooks that were visually augmented, and how would that help people make better choices in their food choices. And she predicted that in 2050, these are the kinds of things that augmented and virtual reality would help assistance, such as that the high tech and smart tools would revolutionize the nutritional landscape. Much like we maybe look at labels on the side of a box, we now would be able, with augmented reality, quickly have at our fingertips the information that we needed, in anything from what is the nutritional benefit of particular food, but how might you create something in recipes. So also gave a sense of agency, because it's a user-driven control, and that you can learn to manipulate problems, and you have that potential of being able to visualize. Another student who just recently finished her research looks at haptics. Now, what are haptics? Haptics are that sense of feel. A lot of times when we think of virtual reality, augmented reality, or immersive technologies, we think of sight. Haptics give that sense of feel. And so talking with the hands, the gesture, language of gesturing, but also that idea that I can be span across many, many thousands of miles and give you a virtual hug. Another student is looking at tech adoptions of immersive media products, and he's looking at it in a really interesting way. He's looking at it for corporations, and how by using immersive technologies, they might be able to better bring the products to their consumer. So I just want to end it here with, what are we so afraid of? And yes, there are things that we might need to bolster for. And yes, as all tools, some types of immersive technologies can have some negative aspects, but there is great potential psychologically, physically, and culturally for our use of immersive technologies.